Pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago. Here comes a really nice example of an animated film that came out in the late 2000s, simply known by the title 9. Yeah, that's just basically the film's name. This one has gone under a lot of people's radars, but it can be pretty difficult to understand why that is. After getting one viewing of this film, I can understand why some people might not necessarily piece this together as a film worth watching or a film simply worth being a blockbuster. It might have been around for a little while in people's minds, but then some might have forgotten about it. And these days, with the internet and the advent of reviewing and all that good stuff, it seems that this film has been slowly creeping its way back into our lives. I gave it a watch for the very first time, and I really do appreciate this sort of tone that it brought out. It's a similar caliber to the sort of dark, creepy, epic storylines that have happened in other such films and movies. The live-action Transformers and Ninja Turtles ones, the Michael Bay ones, for instance. Yeah, not really a good mentioning. But I could talk a bit more about how this actually takes a lot of faith and a lot of loyalty from the likes of other things. Batman the Animated Series, the real Ghostbusters, and of course the earliest known issues of Pixar films. Toy Story 1 has a bit of a similar caliber to it, a bit of a dark tone, with some creepy bits here and there. An epic soundtrack that might as well have just been ripped off from Star Wars. That's literally what I've compared that to in the past. But the way I see it with 9, it's a bit of a different story. When I talk about dark, I mean dark in this situation. A movie from 2009, many years after such things have been put together. And some regulations have been pieced together to try and keep kids away from supposed dark, creepy things that would potentially give them nightmares for days or even weeks at a time. So, what I will have to say about this film, however, the plot basically shows a dark dystopian post-apocalyptic future. A world formerly known as Earth, but is in fact just a giant wasteland filled with smog, dark skies, and some incredibly creepy and scary monsters. The only hope that could potentially help save the world from future threats or potentially other sorts of destruction are small beings whom were in fact spilled with the sparks of a former scientist who had just died. The very last surviving member of humanity has just taken a toll, and his health was soon drained. So he dies, but not before unleashing a small being simply titled 9. Basically, a little creation, a small machine made to scamper and wander the world to hopefully find an answer to the questions at hand. How can the world be saved? How can the future be preserved? How can a new generation of life ever be put together? Well, it's simple. 9 himself, who was played by Elijah Wood, comes across a few others of his own kind. Another being similar to himself, simply titled 2, is simply out there looking for a few things by himself. 9 tries to help, but both of them unfortunately are faced with a giant monster. This mechanical beast takes 2 away. 9 tries to chase after him. He eventually stumbles across the home of other beings like him. This is in fact the rest of his kind, along with their leader, 1. Yes. All the characters basically are named after numbers. These are in fact the 9 creations that were basically given life by the spark of their own inventor. And their inventor basically left behind some clues in the world that were not really easy to spot. But what would happen would be if they managed to solve the riddle, they would find the answer that would help save themselves. and everybody else from potential devastation. Cataclysmic level disasters that could level the world and possibly destroy it before it even has the chance to heal itself from all of the warfare and other events that humanity had brought upon themselves. Greed, misery, hatred, violence have all allowed Earth itself to completely be demolished. All life on Earth had practically turned themselves non-existent. They've ceased to exist. So it's up to these 9 people, pretty much, to find out what is going on and how they can stop this threat from getting worse. And I probably should mention, the other characters themselves, the 9 beings themselves, basically have themselves the voice talents of other well-known actors. Elijah Wood, as I've said, plays 9, but we have the likes of Christopher Plummer, Jennifer Connelly, Martin Landau, Fred Tatasciore, and others. So this is a jam-packed film with all sorts of memorable names that I've known for a long time. Probably the last instance of Christopher Plummer was in Knives Out. It was also one of the last that he ever starred in before he died last year. And then of course we have Jennifer Connelly, Fred Tatasciore, Martin Landau. I could go on talking about their roles in other films and how I find this film incredibly significant because of how well laid out the cast is, all the members and whatnot, but that would take me a little too long to do. So anyways, 9 simply wants to go find out what happened with 2 and where this monster is. Unfortunately, 1 prevents him from doing so. 1 is one of those leaders that happens to really hold a lot of defiance and does not want to go and risk his life for any possible reason. Of course, we do get to see the other characters come around here and there. The hulking brute known as 8. And then we have 7, who is distinctively female by any means, because the color is much lighter and more smooth in texture compared to everybody else. But then we do get to see the likes of 6 and 2. For whatever reason, we don't get to see a lot of 3 and 4, but there's also 5. So the cast itself doesn't really seem complete. However, it is simply referred to the fact that 3 and 4 didn't quite make it. So it's just 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Probably the biggest thing about this film, though, is the survival element. How long can these characters survive within the film? Throughout the duration that the film has, from start to finish, we do get to understand how that goes down. 9 eventually finds 2 out there all alone, trapped in a cage with some help from others. He's able to be freed, but unfortunately, 9 comes across a little something on the wall. He accidentally activates it, causing 2 to just die. Right at that perfect spot, 2 simply gets sucked up and his spark basically is sent into the wall itself, where it's absorbed and it eventually transforms. A large, terrifying mechanical beast with red eyes, just simply titled The Machine, emerges inside the room, and the factory itself becomes an extreme trap house for the other characters. So 2 gets killed by 9 unintentionally, so to speak, and this machine, as it's just referred to, it's kind of like how in Bolts of Intrigue, one of my own projects, where I just simply refer to the main antagonist as the enemy. You could say that's coincidental, though. Anyways, everybody else does manage to make it out alive, and after some clever tricks, a few tactics pulled off, they manage to escape the grasp of the machine itself. 9 unfortunately feels terrible that he accidentally killed a new friend that he made. So, this wasteland seemed to have been getting worse and worse, but they do need to come up with a plan. Their home eventually gets destroyed under a fiery rage, and then of course, with this voyage to find a new home to move to, and a lot of arguments that happen between 9 and 1 along with the others, eventually the time comes for them to formulate a plan. How can they destroy the machine? 9, however, disagrees. He wants to actually shut it down instead. Because when he does find out what happens in terms of how the scientists have left behind the clues, he does solve the riddle himself, actually, by going back into the same room that he was simply born in, or where he was first activated or whatever. But doesn't that seem odd? The same room where he first emerges and first wakes up after his activation and after the scientist's death, it apparently is the room to where he finds an object. It projects a little video that showcased the scientist's last message, a supposed last will and testament video, which is a bit of a cliche that seems to be repeated a little too often. But no matter what the case, 9 now understands how to shut down the machine once and for all. And this epic battle comes about. Cannons get fired, and after some more brutal hasting that goes down, the other characters eventually start to croak, and we're just left with only a tiny handful. So 1, 7, and 9 happen to be the only survivors out there, while 6, 5, 8, and 2, unfortunately, are all out of commission. So that just goes to show we don't really get a whole lot to work with here. The remaining survivors after the initial attack of the machine and whatnot are basically just there, the only hope for survival on Earth. How can the next generation of life take place? It's hardly ever talked about in this situation. Moreover, the movie itself ends right then and there. They emerge victoriously, knowing that the machine is now out of commission. Their friends will have never been forgotten. Their sparks ascend to the sky, and right then and there, that is the happy ending to a really dark and pretty powerful film. I really love how they did the cast here, and the story is also pretty consequential, easy to understand, and you can also really dig the incredible dark feeling out there. But the real trouble with that, though, especially with the latter, is that you're going to have the right kind of mindset for this. If you can't handle things like darkness and creepy, horror, campy stuff in film, definitely don't give this a watch, because you'll definitely come out a different person. I sure do feel quite different than I already have been. Regardless, though, this film is pretty nice. It managed to earn a decent scoring amongst most critics, and also did a good job at doing the box office a big favor by earning big amounts of money. So what kind of scoring can I give to this? For its somewhat relative success, great cast, and a pretty powerful story that gives us the meaning of how survival works, and also how can you take on the likes of an enormous enemy with just your own wits. For that, 8.7 out of 10.1 is truly what this film deserves. And with that in mind, thank you very much for watching this episode of Films I Should Have Talked About Years Ago. But keep in mind, there's plenty of other stuff to worry about as well. So make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side if you'd like to see more